Yes.
All right, great. So let's get started. So as Nikhil has briefed everyone, the topic for today is sustainable infrastructure, right? So I thought just to set the context straight, I'll start off the presentation with a fun fact that not everyone might be aware, probably. So we all know the honeybees. Um, they are supposed to be great mathematicians, just an FYI. But the fun fact here is that any average honeybee usually only makes about 1/12 teaspoon of honey in its entire lifetime. So it the honey that it makes, it's not even using it. It's not even for herself. Um, the honey that it makes, that everyone makes, is for the generations to come after their life has ended. So that's the kind of sustainable approach or sustainability lessons that we can learn from. There are thousands of lessons that we can learn from just honeybees alone. Forget all different examples we see in nature. But that is the kind of approach we need to have as we are designing our next infrastructure project or as we are working on our next project, right? We are designing it for the generations to come, for it to be resilient and last long. So with that, let's get started on our story for today, which we strongly believe is India's next big story, sustainable infrastructure. So we all know that infrastructure development can do really great things. Um, the, the crazy amount of investments that go into an infrastructure project, especially during times like these when the private sector will suffer due to the lockdown and government has to, provide the economy a stimulus. All the investments in infrastructure get a refreshed focus, right? Everybody, and there's a very good reason for that because one single investment in infrastructure can create jobs for thousands of people across different industries, across different stakeholders. The contribution of an infrastructure, considering all of these ripple effects, is humongous to the GDP. But done wrong, infrastructure can also do really bad things. It is responsible for the majority of waste, construction waste in the country, and it is the major consumption. It is all of our infrastructure put together, all of the systems that we have in India, they consume 25% of energy. So, what if we could reduce the bad things and focus more on the good things and do more of the good things? That essentially is what is sustainable infrastructure. It is optimizing for all the good outcomes and eliminating or reducing all the bad outcomes. And in India, um, when we talk about infrastructure for the next 5 years, this number is what we need to be aware of, which is $1.4 trillion. That's the national infrastructure pipeline that's been promised by the government of India. It will be with a mix of public, private, and then different sources of funding and financing. But the point to note here is all of this money is going to be heavily monitored such that all of this money is being put to good use, and to good use is essentially building sustainable infrastructure. So all government mandates, all controls that will be put into place um, will come along with this 1.4 trillion worth of projects. And how can you position your organization such that you capture a major chunk of this 1.4 trillion? That is what we will look at today. So that was a very basic definition of sustainable infrastructure, right? But what if we dig deeper and try to understand the abstract along with some of the metrics, which as we will see later on in the presentation, um, the fundamental goals of sustainable infrastructure design actually align with all of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So if everyone is not aware, I'll just um, uh, I guess, shed some light on the UN SDGs, as we call it. The Sustainable Development Goals are a set of 17 goals that have been identified by the United Nations, and all of the nations around the world have committed to working towards them. And as we progress on all of these goals, we can see that sustainable infrastructure is a way to address all of them at once, either directly or through ripple effects. For the focus, our focus on this presentation is going to be the direct effects of sustainable infrastructure. So we'll look at things like how can we lower carbon emissions, reduce the energy and material consumption of an infrastructure project. How can it be resilient to climate changes? Whether we can simulate different design conditions and design our infrastructure accordingly. And then what is the cutting edge looking like today? What is it in terms of technology? What tools do we have available to achieve all of these outcomes in the shortest amount of time? So before we look at the workflows and everything, I think it's really important to look at what is the policy support coming or looking like from the Indian government. So clearly, we are totally committed to the UN SDGs, and especially the 5 that you see in front of your screen are what we are going to focus on today, because these are what we will directly be impacting through our work on sustainable infrastructure projects. In order to monitor our growth or our impact and progress towards the UN SDGs and towards a sustainable world, we all know about the green building rating. So IGBC is famous and was started focusing on green building projects. So they just took certified buildings after buildings. They analyzed it for its energy consumption and various different parameters, and started giving them ratings on if it crosses a certain threshold of points, it gets a platinum rating, and so on and so forth. But with the rating, the government places really cool incentives, faster environmental clearances, reduction in permit fees, extends. When it comes to buildings, it's like we get additional area that we can build on. And that is now slowly spreading to infrastructure. So IGBC has now extended its rating system to include green townships, mass rapid transit systems, railway stations, green cities, green existing cities, and all of those things, right? So we will look at, while you work on your next infrastructure project, how can you actually go about taking benefit of some of these incentives by meeting the rating. And then government initiatives, where government is trying to directly impact sustainable outcomes for the country, is we all know about the ambitious smart city plan, Swachh Bharat, and Green Corridors initiative, along with green energy. So across all of the sustainable fronts, the government has set its intentions very clear, and the goals are extremely ambitious. We are quite far away from reaching our goals. So how can we expedite this process? Because it's clear that the company that can actually do this faster and do this more efficiently is going to be winning more projects out of the 1.4 trillion. So we looked at the rating system. We looked at what makes a good infrastructure project sustainable, and we kind of boiled it down to these 5 key parameters, right? How efficiently are the resources being optimized on the project? How good is the project at controlling emissions? Water and energy is like one of the most critical elements of or material or things that sustain life on the planet. So how can we use it such that we don't such that we are net positive, such that we are producing more than we are using it, right? And then how can we expedite project execution? So like if an infrastructure project has a great design, but when it comes to implementation, if it comes across a lot of design issues due to the existing conditions or whatever it may be, it's going to face a lot of problems and going to cost a lot and going to be delayed by a lot. And then finally, it has to be resilient to climate change, because we are designing our infrastructure for the next 20 to 100 years. and we don't want it to suffer to crazy monsoons or any extreme weather conditions. So we'll look at all of these 5 parameters and try to understand what is the solution and how are some of the industry leaders addressing all of these. So these are really critical problems, right? But turns out the solution is already in front of our eyes. Turns out a truly sustainable world already exists. The nature as we know it has been doing an R&D for 3.8 billions of years. Just through the process of evolution, it knows what works best and what is sustainable. And we have already had tons of design inspiration from the nature, our bullet trains taking the shape of the beak of a kingfisher, or some of our HVAC systems getting some of their inspiration from the nature. So all of these solutions, all of these questions that we have already been answered. It's only a matter of looking at them, identifying what the nature is doing. And once you've identified that, it's about having the right tools to be able to do it. So when we looked at our 5 main parameters, let's start with waste reduction and circularity, right? So before we look at the solution, of course, the first step is looking at the problem, looking at the market opportunity. What is it that you're going to get by solving this problem? So again, turns out that barely a very low percentage of waste in India is getting treated. The numbers that you see is for urban waste in India. So out of 62 million tons of urban waste that is generated, only 11.9 million is treated, right? Just the waste management market is going to grow at 15, is going to grow to 15 billion at a rate of 7% annually by 2025. And then, so the solution or capturing the market opportunity over here is going to be about controlling this waste, recycling this waste, so reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Circularity. It is crazy to think that construction materials, while they account for 40 to 60% of a project cost, they are still the largest contributor to waste in India. How is that happening? Clearly, something is going wrong as we design and build the project. So how can we optimize it for material usage and quantities? And how can we look for more recycling opportunities and then work towards reduce, reuse, and recycle? And then the other thing is reducing embodied carbon. So there are clear mandates from the government coming in to reduce the carbon emissions, reduce the level of embodied carbons in all the projects that we do. But just to quickly gather everybody's attention, I just wanted to put a graphic in front of all of you. When you look at the global cost of global social cost of carbon, it's the highest for India out of all the countries. I mean, we are not even like as advanced when it comes to energy usage as the US or more developed countries. We don't even have that much energy consumption compared to some of those countries, and yet the social cost of carbon of India is the highest. So with every ton of CO2 that goes in the air, it is costing us $108, and that's the highest across the board. So we can look at nature and try to draw some inspiration for this particular problem, right? So carbon exists in nature also, but one thing that we see is that nature doesn't really treat carbon as waste. Okay, the imbalance is what is unhealthy, but carbon is actually a raw material for the tree. They need carbon to live. So as long as there's a circularity among all the materials or everything that is going on in our environment, and as long as we are able to maintain a healthy balance, we'll have a sustainable solution for our project. So how can we implement those principles on our project, right? So think of all the green initiatives coming up from the government, where green corridors, we have to build more green corridors. We have to take into account all the sustainability initiatives for those rating systems. So what if we had a tool where we can analyze between different options and we can place green infrastructure and actually visualize the effect and simulate the effect of those different designs, right? What if we could weigh the options by the life cycle cost and then choose the one that is the most circular? Or what if after we've chosen a design, uh, let's say a road layout, for example, how can we simulate the potential traffic conditions on that road and then optimize our signaling systems or um, augment the road systems or redesign those existing road systems? We have the data. The things that are lacking are the tools, and the tools that can let us do all of these things very easily. The tools that do this very intuitively. So these are the tools that we have access to already. It's just the know-how that we need and need to train our staff in order to be able to tackle these projects and win more of these projects. So you can design more green infrastructure by simulating different outcomes for circular outcomes. And then you can, of course, optimize your design by, again, running traffic simulation for your infrastructure, roads and highways, etc. Then we move on. Then we look at the water and energy consumption, right? Water and energy. How can we live without water and energy? I cannot imagine a day when the lights are out or the water is out in our building. So again, it's really crazy to think that we are losing 20 to 35% of our water just in distribution. The distribution losses are, if they are amounting to 20 to 35%, we are clearly not doing something right. Again, design needs rethinking, and more importantly, the execution of it. As we go about building this infrastructure, that needs rethinking, because up until today, infrastructure has been designed just considering the project cost. But while as more and more the Indian government is focusing on the entire life cycle cost of the project, it's important to rethink the entire construction such that we have access to the data as it's getting built and after it has been built completely. So that is a huge market opportunity. If you can bring those distribution losses down, nothing like it. All of the corporate India is running towards a net water positive status. They want to be treating more water than they are using. And then there's this dichotomy between we have the craziest monsoons and yet we have the craziest droughts. How is that happening? Why aren't we able to capture the rainwater, store it, and then use it whenever it's necessary? Why is it that when the floods are too much, and drainage system essentially forms a very fundamental piece, because if you affect the drainage system of a city, that's going to affect the transport system, that's going to affect the utility. So it's going to have a ripple effect across all the infrastructure of the city. So it's really important that we design our wet water infrastructure such that all of these future extreme conditions are taken into account. But more importantly, as again, we are going about building that infrastructure, we need to think about optimizing it for water. And then energy efficiency. So there was a study done from 2000 until today, where just by introducing different energy efficiency tools in a facility, we were able to reduce our energy demand or strain on our energy resources by 15%, just by energy efficiency over the last 2 decades. So imagine what is possible in the coming decade, right? With the new tools and cutting edge technology that we have available. Again, here, when it comes to energy, we set very ambitious targets for renewable energy as well as solar. So by 2022, we expect to reach, so the total energy installed capacity of India right now is about 370 gigawatts. So by 2022, we want 175 gigawatts coming from renewables, and right now we are only at 86. So that has to more than double in just the next 4 years. Out of those 175, 100 has to come purely from solar, and we haven't even reached 1/3 market. So that's the market opportunity we are looking at. But that is just about water and energy efficiency. Let's look at efficient execution, because even with water and energy efficiency, we saw that the major challenge really is like water distribution losses. It's about the quality of the infrastructure that is being built. If the quality is good, it will reduce the losses and it will optimize for water and energy consumption. So how do you ensure the quality? You ensure that by efficient execution. And India, again, is far, far away from the best practices when it comes to efficient execution. Various studies have been done. Very popular is the Ministry of Statistics program and implementation, where they monitor more than every project that's worth more than 150 crores. So as you can see on your screen, the numbers are crazy. I mean, 400 projects out of 1,700 reporting cost over and up close to 600 with time escalation. That's costing us trillions of lakhs and crores. I forget how many zeros are there in all these numbers. It's too much. That's all I know. So various researches have been done to kind of see the differences between India versus some of the other countries who are doing this right. And one clear difference that was observed was that we are not spending enough in the planning stage of the project. And this was compared by looking at the DPR spend on an infrastructure project in India compared to other countries, and then comparing that with the cost overruns. So there's a direct correlation between the amount of energy and money that is being poured into planning with the time or the cost savings that can be done throughout the implementation of the project. So this is again a very simple problem, right? Like we need to solve for efficiency. But when we look at this problem, we kind of, with the numbers that we see on our screen, we kind of lose hope sometimes. So let's again go back to the nature to draw some inspiration. Honeybees. The beehive is their infrastructure. Honeybees are known to be great mathematicians, right? They have to design this beehive taking into account different parameters. What are those parameters, right? So their sole purpose, what they want to do is collect as much honey as possible and find a place to store it. So the beehive is their place where they should be able to navigate, where they should be able to store maximum amount of honey. Well, so they have to, of course, the design consideration needs to take into account the navigation so that they can navigate it properly, and they are consuming the least amount of material because they are facing a really important math problem at this stage. What they have to do, so they build the entire beehive with this material called beeswax. So they, for every ounce of beeswax, they need to be able to store 8 ounces of honey. So it's a clear efficiency and math problem. So they go to their textbooks and figure out what is the shape or how can they structure their beehive such that they are optimizing for the beeswax. And that's how they are able. And this process itself has evolved over the last many years, where they started out with a circular shape and slowly progressed towards a hexagonal shape. So learning from learning and always improving their infrastructure for sustainable outcomes. That is what they are doing. So we also have access to the best mathematical machine there is, which is our computer. So we need to be able to make use of that for us. And it's simple, like there's no need for us to be working in 2D anymore. When we can directly work in 3D and let the mathematical computer do all the drawings, inspections, and all of that for us. That will help us design more efficiently, where we are not spending too much time on the downstream activities of uh, uh, editing drawings and annotations and things like that. We can also set in rules to check various design standards, right? Automate that entire process. We can simulate different design outcomes uh, on the computer itself, such that our designs are really optimized. We can evaluate the feasibility and the impact of different design options. So these are the different um, functions that we can do very easily with the help of tools that exist today, right? And by simulating a design for the best outcome, only can we then ensure that the design is the most efficient design. And then when we actually go about implementing that project, we have a lot more control because we've already eliminated all the clashes by running a simulation on our computer. We've minimized the errors and rework that we would have faced on the field on a traditional project. And this is essentially reducing the paperwork, reducing the amount of redundant activities that we have to invest in right now. So it's also putting more time on the plate for your engineers. So that, and then that process can be taken a step further by actually automating a lot of your activity. So as your design, for example, is progressing from preliminary design to detailed design, there are a lot of elements of the detailed design that takes a major chunk of the time on a project. So what if there was a tool that could let you program scripts very easily just by dragging and dropping different functions? And with that, you are automating the rail layout, for example, the detailing of light poles, for example, or just placement of all the different city furniture that you have on a project, right? You can optimize this. You can feed the data just through Excel sheets, and you only have to worry about the data and the design. The activities are done and taken care of for. So we can bring in efficiency into our projects with building information modeling, and we can take that a step further by building in automation into our workflow. And then finally, we reach the stage of climate resiliency. So increasingly, everyone has heard this term of resiliency over the last 2 years. It has become extremely popular. All the governments are talking about it, and all the infrastructure is designed with resiliency in mind. Especially with what we've seen in 2020 so far, has been a disastrous year with COVID-19, obviously, and then the wildfires that started in Africa, just being a footnote, just looking like a footnote today. Rising sea levels are again a very critical problem. And if we just look at India, like 1/3 of our population is living along the coast, along the 7,500 kilometer coastline. So there have been studies done to analyze the impact of rising sea levels and extreme weather conditions on our infrastructure. And you can see it's probably going to cost us 3% of our GDP. And that is not an acceptable amount in any way. The government realizes it and wants you guys to think of it and design your project for resiliency when you work or bid on your next project. So what can we look at nature and what can we learn about resiliency? So all of us know about cactus, and the moment you see this plant, it reminds you of the desert. It's the desert plant. It's like surviving extreme weather conditions, and those are the images that pop into your head, right? But there are 4,000 different varieties of this plant, and each of these varieties is tailored the atmosphere or the temperature or the environment that it is in. So it adapts to the climate. It changes as per the nature wants it to change, and therefore, as a reward for that, it sustains longer than any other plant, and this is the only plant you will see when you go in arid and dry regions, right? So, can we think of our infrastructure in the same way? Can we simulate it for extreme weather conditions? Can we design? So, for example, Netherlands is a great example of a country which used to be completely underwater and has now redesigned its infrastructure to. It's been redesigned for 100 years strong. Sorry, 1,000 years strong. So the normal designs are designed for 100 years, but Netherlands have actually gone a step ahead and done simulations on 1,000 year storms as well. So how are they doing this? They are doing this with the capabilities that the tools today give us, where just by feeding in the rainfall data, the tool can simulate the flow of the water, give you the catchment basin, tell you where you need to place culverts, and also help you design to achieve zero runoff, and tell you what green infrastructure can you plan in your area such that you can achieve zero runoff. So these are the these are the things that we can do today, as on today. So just think of the possible outcomes or the potential for this technology to progress and lead to very, very interesting outcomes. At the center piece of it, so when you think of infrastructure on a city scale, you have to think about GIS, right? Because that is how any infrastructure across the city is operated. When you operate the entire, which is called the capital project, you need GIS data to inform you. When you build, we looked at building information modeling, right? So as we are constructing our next project, we're going to leverage BIM. As we are leveraging this data can be informed by the GIS data which is the existing data of the city. And then as we finish our design, all of that data can go back to the GIS system so that the city can use this as the fundamental piece of information for running n number of simulations that they want to in order to become a smart city. So BIM and GIS integration again forms a fundamental piece of being resilient. If we want to adapt to different circumstances, we need the data in hand. We need the tools to give us to help us read actionable insights and actually execute and work on them. Over the last 6 months, entire design guidelines are now changing because of what we've seen with COVID-19 and because of the need for social distancing. New health guidelines are necessary as you plan your spaces. So you again need ways in which you can simulate the movement of people such that you can ensure enough distance among all of them, get them moving with confidence. And then also, as you're thinking about the air quality of a system, how can you simulate the air conditions inside a system and then optimize the design based on that. So nature has all the answers that we seek. So we looked at examples from mathematician bees to resilient cacti, and all we need now is a tool. And turns out we already have the right tool to succeed as well. The tool that will help you design to life's principles of resiliency, efficiency, and circularity, helping you design better, help improving the materials that you use by optimizing between different material choices, and help you manage your projects as you move on to construction and operation. Let's look at very quickly one example in our country today. So everybody might be aware of the Smart City Dholera, which is DSIR, the Special Investment Region, an industrial smart city that is being developed across the BMIC corridor. So Tata Consulting engineers are responsible for building all of the infrastructure of the city, so that's roads and highways, drainage, sewerage, flood control measures, power lines, water supply, railways, all of it. They have to think this a design at this scale and a design that should be smart throughout the operation of the city needs a complete shift in thinking, right? You need to be able to think of the various different road layouts such that they can affect, such that you optimize for traffic conditions, placement of utilities, and it's going to be an industrial city. So you need to take into account the entire industry supply chain as well. So you need a tool that can help you design for all of these different outcomes. But in order to do that, you first need to build an intelligent model of all the infrastructure in the road. So TCE, they built 3D models of 180 kilometers of roads and highways, and they use Navisworks to make sure that all of their infrastructure is rid of all the major clashes at least before it progressed onto the site for construction. But that was just one piece of the puzzle. In order for the city to be smart, it needs to be sustainable, right? How can you design it to promote sustainability, efficiency, and improve the standard of living? The entire city is built on a flat, low-lying plain. So naturally, water was a very big design consideration when designing the city, because at such a larger scale, you cannot have gravity as your only means for designing your entire drainage system. Because it's flat, you need to be able to slope the terrain and grade it such that gravity can be of use to you. So with the help of Map3D, the entire contour maps of the region were created, and using Civil 3D, the surface watersheds were analyzed along with the floodplain, and the slope and grading was established in order to make that happen. Design with such scale really need the tools that can help you achieve all of those things. So we looked at the tools. I mentioned AC collection to help you work towards your sustainable project. By using AC collection, your advantages are going to be twofold. The time savings is the first one, and you can see in front of your screen how this was a benchmarking study that was done between the same projects, doing them in a traditional way and then doing them in a framework way. And you can see the scale of time savings that are possible across each of the stages of the project. And then the second one is, of course, creating value. So as you are going to target a lot of these government incentives for infrastructure projects, you want to be able to optimize and reduce your design costs. You want to avoid costly errors, the constructability issues that cause change orders worth 25% of the project cost and things like that. You want to look for potential recycling opportunities such that you reduce the dependency on raw materials. And then, of course, you want efficient operations of the entire infrastructure throughout its life cycle. So all the data that you have worked on and fed the model with, you want to use it throughout the life cycle of the project. And that essentially is the AC collection. Put together all of these tools that you saw today that will help you simulate across all of those outcomes, design more efficiently, and build and operate more efficiently across all of those stages. All of those tools have been packed together into AC collection. And then BIM 360 design, BIM 360 is the platform where all of your projects and all these tools come together, forming a common data environment, helping you design your next sustainable infrastructure project.